So in this directed learning, I wanted to look at the Oregon Health Plan and then briefly look at the Affordable Care Act, briefly look at Medicare supervision requirements for PTAs, and then I'll look at some definitions in the chapter. So the Oregon Health Plan is something that's been in place for quite some time, since the 90s. It was a priority of former Governor Kitzhaber, who was an emergency room physician from Roseburg. And it's essentially unique in the sense that it hasn't really been replicated by, I don't think, a lot of states, but it does provide what's called a prioritized list. So not everything is covered under the Oregon Health Plan. I think that's really important. And that list is revisited every year. And if you look onto this link, and in no way am I expecting you to know what's covered and what's not covered. That's not the point, because this is exhausting. However, my point is that every year and you can download this list. It takes about 3 or 4 minutes to download, and it goes over what's covered. And those of you that work in billing for offices that accept Medicaid clients or Oregon Health Plan clients would be well familiar with this list. The point, though, is that you do need to know, just kind of in general, what is covered in some of these different conditions. And I think it's really important to know that the list is evolving. If the state is, it really varies, really dependent upon a number of things. And there's an advisory board that meets every year. And there's a physician. There's always a physician on the advisory board. And what is covered and what isn't covered is in part due to even some lobbying by the various interest groups, including physical therapy. For example, women's health is now covered on the Oregon Health Plan, certain women's health treatments, whereas before they were not. And also what's covered now is some lymphedema treatment, which before lymphedema treatment was not covered. Some things that are related to like ankle sprains and muscle strains are not covered. Generalized weakness is not covered as well. So those are things I do want you to know. And just to kind of explain, some people hear some things and have pretty strong opinions about what should and shouldn't be covered based on spin by media primarily, I think, and just by some very persuasive people that, well, we all have interests, right? So one of the areas that I just wanted to call out that people sometimes have problems with is bariatric surgery, and this is a condition where people have who are affected by multiple health conditions, including having challenges relating to size and obesity, and in a case where other more conservative treatments have not worked, if it's something that will improve the quality of life of a person, it is now covered. In specific circumstances, of course, need to be met in order to be covered, and then physical therapy can help with this condition post-op, to get a person up and moving and such, and to get people on the path to wellness through our interventions. And that is something that before was not covered, and I've seen that change in the last 20 years. So as far as the Affordable Care Act, this is a piece of legislation that's happened within your lifetimes. All of you were born before 2010. But what I wanted to, I think is important to at least have a basic understanding of the Act. I think as the Act has been, it's been with us now for 19 years. It's has a bit more secure footing as far as staying in place, but all that can change really quickly, I guess is what my big message is. I think it's important to call out, what it does, and what are good things in regards to what we do in terms of providing physical therapy services, and ultimately, providing care to underserved populations. And to really know, I think it's really important to know for those especially that are traveling from state to state and want to be traveling PTs, that there are many states that really have decided, and how the act was set up, that states can opt out of it if they don't want to implement the act. And so there are some states that there's very little, if any, of the act has been implemented. And so what may be covered in Oregon may not be covered at all in Arkansas, or what's covered in Washington State may not be covered at all in Wyoming. And if you look at the Affordable Care Act and dig into it more, you can actually do some research on that, but that's not where I want to go this conversation to go necessarily, but it really is about some things that are now covered, including counseling for teens and people who have diabetes, who have issues, which kind of goes back to bariatric surgeries, those that have complications of diabetes and such from having difficulties with size, right, and health conditions as a result. So there's care now, whereas before there was no care. And I think probably the more popular part of the act, which many of you are probably aware of, is that in the state of Oregon at least, and not all states, that if you're under 26 you're not covered under parents' insurance plans. And not everybody knows that, but I think a lot of people know that. And then some of the other benefits of the act. And that's in no way to minimize the fact that it's controversial for many people. There's still opposition to the act that is strong. And then the last part to call out is the Medicare supervisions for PTAs. And we talked about this earlier this term. I'm not asking you to memorize what a CRA is, or I do want you to know outpatient rehab facility. You don't necessarily have to memorize CORF, but outpatient rehab, and how it's different if it's a hospital-based outpatient service. PT can leave the site and the PTA can still provide treatment, but if it's a private, freestanding outpatient business that is not in any way connected to the hospital, the PT must be present in that building for the PTA to provide treatment. So it's different based on the setting. So this is where the outpatient hospital setting is where the PT does not have to be on site. There's a distinction and a difference. And the same with private practice. So it's good to know stuff, good to know information, because you want your service to be reimbursed, and if there was an audit done and you were in a setting where there was an investigation and it turns out that you were providing services without a PT on site, for example, or a private practice setting, an outpatient, that claim could be denied due to not complying with supervision requirements under Medicare.